to America's Mayor Live. And once again, we begin with breaking news almost every night around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. One more nail, in this case, 17 nails probably, are delivered for Joe Biden's proverbial coffin, criminal coffin, or keys to the jailhouse cell, however you want to look at it, while the only person under investigation, indictment, is the guy who hasn't committed any crimes, the guy they have to make up the crimes in order to get him to get him in some kind of trouble, or they have to indict him for the first time of anyone ever for doing it. But we'll get to that later. But because we have a bigger story right now, which they're not covering on the communist news networks, the ones who operate like they're in a communist country, and therefore tell you only the news that is favorable to the regime and withhold devastating news about the regime and news that you need to know, because you need to know that you now live in a fascist country in which, at least for sure, there's no justice system. The prosecutor of Trump, Jack Smith, who has a long history of unethical violations, set out a standard and said the law should be the same, or is the same, in America for everyone. In which case, let's see if the law is the same for the Bidens. Today, Senator Chuck Grassley, I think maybe the most senior member of the Senate, if not close to it, and probably one of the most distinguished and honorable members of the Senate, trusted up until now by both sides of the aisle, revealed that the person who gave them the original information, the original ultimate source of the information that $10 million was paid to the Bidens, $5 million to Joe when he was vice president, and $5 million to Hunter in order to fix the case against the crooked Burisma company, also notified the confidential, reliable FBI informant, and this is recorded in an official FBI FD 1023. According to Senator Grassley, it indicates that this person has 17 recordings, some of Joe Biden, some of Hunter Biden, which he kept as insurance should they double cross him. And the recordings recite the evidence and the corroboration and the support for what he told the FBI, which is that he paid a total of $10 million to Hunter and Joe Biden, as well as the $1 million a year that he paid in so-called salary to Hunter. And lest we forget a couple million here or there, the $1 million he also paid to Devin Archer, who was a partner of Hunter's. And that joint, almost $2 million, went into Hunter's company. The real question is whether Joe Biden got half of Devin's million or just half of Hunter's. He surely got half of Hunter's because, unbeknownst to even Zlochevsky, Hunter, on the hard drive, makes it clear that he gives half of his salary, and this was salary, half of his income, to his father. So, wow, do we have evidence? I mean, you have more evidence in this case than I have ever seen, truthfully. Never seen a case like the case against Joe Biden with as much evidence that he is guilty as sin, guilty as anything you want to compare it to. And I told you that the 10 million was the tip of the iceberg. I told you that because I know what's coming up. I got to tell you, I will admit, didn't know Zlochevsky recorded these conversations. I knew there were such conversations, and that Biden and Zlochevsky communicated with each other, and that Biden, the real contact here was Zlochevsky to Biden. And let me see, I know the names are tough, and that's why people have a hard time following this. But Zlochevsky was the head of a company called Burisma. That company was built illegally. It was built from leases that were given to Burisma while Zlochevsky was essentially the Minister of Energy of Ukraine. During the period of time that he was Minister of Energy, about 5 years, in the pro-Russian corrupt government of Ukraine, he awarded himself possibly 30 or 40 billion dollars worth of leases, taking them from other companies or taking new leases. During that period of time, he had a partner who ran the company for him, who relocated to Cyprus. When he got out of government, he took the reins back of his company. Shortly thereafter, unfortunately, tragically, his partner died. And he became owner of all of the company because Zlochevsky cheated the widow out of the other half of the company. I'm going to tell you about the widow later. The widow is a big, important part of this. So Zlochevsky now has this stolen company created while he was a minister of government. He owns not just 49%, but 100%. And he's worth somewhere in the vicinity of 30 or 40 billion dollars. When the new government takes over, the first thing they do is go after his company because it is a product of the old pro-Russian regime. And Poroshenko goes after him in London, goes after him all over the world. He decides, I need protection. He gets himself protection in the UK. He hires a former UK politician. He gets himself protection in Poland. He hires a former Polish politician. And he figures, well, who can protect me better than the point man in Ukraine, Joe Biden, just minted by Barack Obama. So he makes a deal. I'll hire your useless son, who just got kicked out of the military for being a degenerate drug addict, such a bad drug addict that he couldn't even stay clean for a month, which, by the way, he didn't stay clean for a month for the next 8 years. I don't know if we blame that all on Hunter. I think maybe we got to blame an awful lot of that on maybe one of the worst fathers in America, Joe Biden, who took his son, who was a drug-addicted, prone teenager, and instead of letting him have regular jobs without extra stress, he made him his chief bagman for an international bribery ring. And over the next 15 years, his son dealt with some of the worst criminals and murderers in the world, designed to take a drug addict and make him into a degenerate drug addict, which is what he became. Again, let's not blame it all on Hunter. Let's look at Dad very carefully here, because Dad could have used any piece of scum in Washington to do this for him. There are plenty. Believe me, in the Democratic Party, you're not going to have trouble finding a bag man, because a lot of them decided to use his son and ruin his life. Similar to a guy who wouldn't recognize his granddaughter. And you think he's a nice guy? Grow up. Get real. So, got to see. There are 17 of these audio recordings, according to Grassley, according to the FBI FD 1023. We'll probably go through the 1023 involving the $10 million. We'll first get Ray to deny that it exists. Then he'll say that it exists, but to give it up would end America. And then he'll eventually show it just to the senators. And then he'll refuse to let us see it because, God forbid, we should see it. We would find out not only what a crook the president is, but what a piece of garbage Ray is, because he's been covering this stuff up for years, right? Let's face it. If this FBI 1023 existed as of the time the election took place, not only did the FBI assist, if not carry out, the covering up of the hard drive, which never would have come out if John Mac Isaacs didn't give it to me. The FBI didn't put it out. The FBI covered it up even after that and helped to spawn the lie that it was Russian disinformation. It means they also had a document indicating there were somewhere 17 audio recordings that proved that Joe Biden was the most crooked presidential candidate in American history. And they let the American people vote, holding back that information. And by the way, the hard drive could have been put out long before the election started. They had the hard drive before Joe Biden even announced for president of the United States. I mean, they were holding it in anticipation of getting their candidate. Since I would think the right new name for the FBI would be the Biden Secret Police, don't you think? And then I would think everybody in the FBI who wasn't part of the Biden Secret Police would quit and see if America could make up a new law enforcement organization that did treat all of us equally, as opposed to one that worked for the Biden regime and was willing to frame innocent men and women to help the biggest crook we've had as president. Well, these recordings are extraordinary if they exist. I can't tell you they exist. I've never heard them. I've never seen them. I know that what Senator Grassley is reciting from what allegedly is the content of these tapes is totally accurate, because I've gotten it from many, many witnesses. But I have it from witnesses, which is usually the way you do it in a trial. It could have been done 3 or 4 years ago if America had a fair justice system. But we don't. So please, don't fool yourself. Don't get upset when I say it's a fascist justice system. Please recognize the proof that it is and help us do something about it. Because if you live in ignorance, this country could be gone soon as anything resembling what was given to us. And for that, I don't know, we'll be the cursed generation. Our parents took a country and made it better. Our grandparents saved this country and the world. Just a generation or two later, we destroy it because we get brainwashed by the press, because we have this miserable, demented creature in the White House. It's hard. Let's put the audio recordings aside for a moment, because again, I can't. All I can do is tell you what the news is. The news is that Senator Grassley says that there's an FBI document indicating that Mr. Zlochevsky has, and of course, Grassley didn't use the name Zlochevsky. In case you ever meet him, do you want to take a look? You want to see what he looks like?
Bring him up, Mayor.
Let's see.
And then, after you do this, we'll bring up a picture of him. What do you think's on those recordings?
So do you see it now? Do we see him?
Nope. Second. It's gonna take a second.
Well, maybe I'll do it this way. I can't figure.
Keep it on there, and I'll bring it up. Just put it on
Okay.
there.
Yeah. I mean, he's quite a good looker. See if you can see in his face. The real question is, here's a really interesting thing that could be on one of those, those shows where they tell you about a murder and then they try to solve it documentary style. Some are real good, right?
That's right, Mayor.
We should do one on who murdered Zlochevsky's partner.
Bring the page down if you can a little bit.
Or was he murdered? Was he murdered or not? So here's what.
There he is.
There's good old Mike Cole. Hey, Mike, you like Joe, right? This is the guy. There's the guy, Mykola. Mykola Zlochevsky has, if you were to introduce him at a speech, you would say, I'm now introducing Mykola Zlochevsky, president, CEO, and owner of the most crooked oil and gas company in the world, constructed entirely on leases stolen from the government by the gentleman you see there, Mr. Zlochevsky, who has told people that he was very happy eventually that he got away with about somewhat over $100 million in bribes in order to keep his $40 billion company, which he acquired dishonestly. So Zlochevsky has literally, this is evidence that I have, been quite happy with the amount that was extorted for him to keep his company. The 100 million didn't bother him. Now, I say 100 million because we also had not only bribes to the Bidens, he had to take care of England and other countries, probably Cyprus, about 3 or 4 other countries where he had to take care of people also. Then there was the big one, President of Ukraine wasn't going to let him get off the hook without getting a big piece. And now I want you to realize what I'm telling you, Zelensky knows Poroshenko got a bribe between 50 and 100 million, depending on where you go for your evidence. The guy that Joe was on the phone with was sharing in the bribes. Now, I have records and put them out a long time ago that show 4 conversations of almost an hour each on the telephone between the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden at the time, and the President of Ukraine, Poroshenko. Those conversations all took place in a 2-week frame where the month of the month of February of 2016 begins with the office of Burisma being raided and an arrest warrant served on the company, and the company closed down by the prosecutor that Biden had removed, who he said, they keep saying he was corrupt. Not a single indication in any file anywhere that he was corrupt. There's even a tape-recorded conversation where Poroshenko makes clear to Biden that the guy's not corrupt. They don't want you to hear that either. That one I have heard. So, the 1st or the 2nd of February 2020, the Burisma office is raided. Stuff is taken out. But unlike our arrest warrants, these arrest warrants apparently carry the legal power to close the business down. So the business was closed down. So now Zlochevsky panics, of course, and he had paid Joe some money in advance to be ready when this happened. This is what he feared, that the government would take his company, his $40 billion company that he worked so hard to put together by cheating and stealing and killing maybe. So that's when he brings Joe in, and you want proof of that beyond the audio recordings, if they exist or not. Immediately, there are 4 frantic telephone calls between Biden and Poroshenko. There's no month in the 8 years that Joe is president that he calls this guy 4 times. There are very few times that he calls anybody 4 times and stays on the phone for an hour. And that all culminates in Poroshenko firing Shokin, who will tell you the whole story on a witness stand under oath. You don't even need the recordings. You got a witness named Shokin, who they attempted to kill a couple of years ago. That I have on tape. I have Shokin on tape. You're free to go look at it on my podcast. Maybe I'll play some of it again in the next couple of days. So you can see Shokin himself, who is here's Mr. Shokin, actually, if you want to see him. There he is right there. And that's a picture taken during the videotaped deposition that I have of him. The FBI never thought it was important to interview him, but I did. Don't you think you'd interview someone who alleges that the Vice President of the United States took a bribe and he has personal knowledge of it? Now, I wanted to get him on tape if, in case, God forbid, he died. And then all of a sudden I get a call and he's in the hospital in Ukraine suffering from, you guess, what do the Russians and Ukrainians, what's their preferred method of killing? Do you know? Does anyone know what their preferred method of killing is? You know how you can tell it's a Russian or Ukrainian murder?
Russian poison.
Poison. Yeah. He was poisoned. Yeah, it was poisoned. Just kind of a coincidence that the main witness against Joe Biden and Poroshenko gets poisoned. Well, I won't tell you how we did it, but we assisted in getting him to a neutral hospital and helped to save his life. I will play some of that tape for you. But this guy should have been interviewed 4 years ago by the FBI. They interviewed no one. No one. I'm sure they never did anything to try to get these audio tapes. We'll have to find out how long they had this. I'll give you another example. When I gave them this information, I told them about, and then we'll get back to the murder mystery. I told them about a woman who was a high-level executive of Burisma. She was actually ultimately like a chief accountant. She was originally the chief bookkeeper, and she proffered through a very, very extraordinarily reliable source. When you find out who it is, you'll see what I mean, that she could give the American government all of the offshore bank accounts that Burisma used to pay off corrupt politicians, which included Joe Biden and his family, specifically their offshore accounts. Offshore account when the U.S. Treasury Department interfered and told the government he was dealing with not to show anyone the account. Now, that's really strange since the American government had 160 or 170 suspicious activity reports against him and his son, or against his son, or against his son's company. You would think the U.S. government would want to know what was in those boxes, but not if it's Joe Biden. No. I bet there's no one that has 170 suspicious activity reports. There's certainly no one that has 170 suspicious activity reports and nothing was done. This cover-up is monumental. This cover-up indicates that we have a corrupt government. How can you sit back there where you are listening to this and not determine that you have to do something about this? How can any American do that? We're going to leave our government like this? We just gave, what do we take, $2 billion out of the IRS? $82 billion to the IRS and the Treasury Department that covers up 170 suspicious activity reports of the Bidens, that tells the Ukrainian police not to look at a offshore account. Now, this woman was willing to give up all of that in return for the witness protection program. We gave that information as part of the 5 hours of information we gave to the FBI and the U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh way back in January of 2020. That's the information that led to the dispute between Raskin and Barr last week, in which Raskin said that the Justice Department found that information to be unsubstantiated, or I think the word was their usual word. It exists only in a Democrat cover-up dictionary. It's called debunked. Debunked means that it's actually been proven. See, whenever you hear a Democrat say it's been debunked, you know the guy's guilty, because that's when they use that word. So Raskin said, "Oh, that report was debunked." For some reason that we'll have to examine more closely when we go take Barr apart. Barr very, very clearly stood up and said, like hell it was. That information and all that information was sent on from the U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh to the U.S. Attorney in Delaware for investigation, which indicates that it passed the first hurdle of review, because the way Barr did this, he set up the first U.S. attorney to look it over and get rid of the ones that weren't substantiated, weren't true, could not be substantiated. And the ones that looked solid, he sent on. This one looked solid. He sent it on to Delaware, the deep hole where apparently Delaware exists to just delay everything, stop it, and protect Biden. Now, unbeknownst, I think, to the people involved in the cover-up, there was an agent, because there are plenty of them that are honest and create problems for them, like the people who produced this 1023. One of the agents must have looked at this and decided that he had an informant that knew something about this, and that's how we end up with the 1023. So when they like to disparage it and say it comes from Giuliani, therefore, by the way, based on my record, if it comes from Giuliani, it should be deemed absolutely true, because everything that's come from me has been found to be true, including now this. So the FBI agent went out and he had a informant of proven past reliability who apparently had this relationship with Zlochevsky, and Zlochevsky gave him this information. When they want the rest of the information about Zlochevsky, which they already have, which I gave them, which fills this out even further, I will give it to you. Give it to them. I will not give it to you yet, because I am still hopeful that somebody honest will eventually get to investigate this, and I don't want to prejudice it. I've never given up any information that wasn't otherwise available, and I only gave up the information that they rejected because I felt I had no place else to go but the court of public opinion, since I had a crooked DOJ, a crooked FBI. The one I found totally incredible, and I really need an answer from Barr on this, is why the woman in Ukraine was never questioned, never even visited to find out if her fear of being killed was true. There's no way you would reject interviewing her, because I mean, when somebody gives you information like that and you're doing an investigation, which I have done more of them than probably any of these people, and I certainly have never done ones that have gotten as screwed up as Smith's have, reversed by the Supreme Court, found to be unethical, all that stuff. But I want you don't have to be an investigator. Let's just exercise a little common sense here. When you get an allegation from someone, here's how you measure, should I look into it further? First thing you want to know is, are they in a position to have this information? If somebody comes to you and says, I know that Senator so-and-so takes bribes, and the guy is a guy that, lives in another state, haven't met the senator, you start asking him, when did you see the senator? And he's got no answers for it. Well, you may have to follow it up, but you got a pretty good idea the guy is, jerking around. Now, suppose it's different. Suppose the guy comes to you and he's the chief of staff to the senator, like she was the chief accountant of Burisma. So now we know one thing: lying or not, the person is in a position to know. That puts the person immediately in a different position with regard to a professional, honest investigator. It's almost unthinkable that you would interview that person. Something wrong with them up front. Because once a person in a position to know gives you information, at a minimum, you got to check it out, even to show it's untrue when you have a public official involved. If someone gave me that information when I was U.S. attorney about any public official, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat, I would not allow that not to be followed up. Gosh almighty, I'd follow it up even if I thought it untrue, to protect the person's reputation. There'd be only one circumstance under which I wouldn't follow through: if I was crooked. To me, there's no explanation for why they didn't interview her other than they were crooked. And I really would like to know if Barr knew about it. I mean, he had plenty of time to know about it. It was January of 2020, almost a year before the election. Apparently, the whole body of information was found credible enough, which included her as one of the main features of what we gave them. The entire body of information was deemed credible enough to move it from Pittsburgh to Delaware, where it was supposed to be investigated. But apparently being investigated to them means sometime in 2027. Maybe 2030. Maybe it'll be like what Pfizer wanted. You can look at the document 75 years from now. Barr's conduct needs investigation. It's very weird. Like, did he know about the hard drive? If he did, he's real guilty. He's talking about Trump being toast. If he knew about the hard drive, he's toast, right? Imagine Attorney General withholding a hard drive during a presidential election that shows something like, 50 to 60 crimes committed by the main candidate, one of the main candidates, for which there is documentary evidence tape recordings, charts, bank records, eyewitnesses, and a son who explains the whole thing from the inside. He's a good enough lawyer to know it's a slam dunk case. He's a smart enough man to know it would change the election. And he's a smart enough man to know if you do that, you're assisting in putting a major crook in the White House. So maybe he didn't know. I'm not saying that sarcastically. That whole department is so screwed up. Maybe he didn't know. And Ray kept it from him. But somebody, the people who know have to go to jail. This is unthinkable that you would do this. But now we've got 17 audio recordings. I expect there'll be another indictment of Trump in the next week. Right? Poor Trump. I mean, the more evidence you get on Biden, the more they indict him. Have you noticed a pattern here? You get blockbuster evidence on Biden, and Trump gets indicted. Biden bribes Poroshenko, and Trump gets impeached for bribery. I don't know, why am I laughing? I should be crying. The pattern I'm telling you is unfortunately and tragically true. And when you're on the inside of this, as I have been for 17 to 18 to 19 to 20 to 21 to 6 years. You know, before this, I had a full head of hair. And I was 6'3". Now, well, you don't remember. I was 6. That's why the mafia was so scared of me, because I was so big. Now I'm just, normal size, no hair. I used to be 35.
That's fine. Well, Mayor, maybe we'll play it. We'll play our ad from Kirk Elliott and come right back.
After all, we're not communists.
And we still have
faith and family, freedom and finance are 4 things that we would do anything to protect. I trust the team at Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors, with providing the advice and sound strategies to take advantage of the inflationary pressures, the high interest rates, and the international challenges we face today. The Kirk Elliott team, with over 29 years of experience, shares our values and believes in people over profit. They can help you protect your finances from the big government policies that are out of our control. So what's in our control? The decision to act or not to act is within our control. I encourage you to act. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors today. Start working with a team that will help you protect your retirement assets with gold and silver while sharing your desire to protect your faith, family, and freedom. Call them today, 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900, and tell them Rudy sent you. Or simply fill out a request for a free consultation at kirkelliottphd.com/Rudy. But some of them have Greek derivation. I was terrible in Greek. The alphabet confused the hell out of me. So now we have everyone back. I told Getter things that I don't tell anybody else. No, go on Getter. All you guys on Getter should go to Dr. Maria. She's on Getter. We all feel real comfortable on Getter because, particularly back in the old bad days, which were about 4 weeks ago, when you could get banned for anything. So you tended to tell not so much the truth, but you tended to say it a little more directly. And I think it's just remarkable. Somebody should do a review of that. Maybe we will. Of all the things that people got banned for that are now true. It's like all the things that I said that I got tortured for, suspended from the bar, right, that are true. What does Trump say when he sees me, Ted?
Rudy was right.
Yeah, Rudy was right.
He says a couple of things. He says the greatest mayor.
Oh,
and
no. The one I'm talking about is Rudy
was right
Rudy
about
was right.
everything. And then you say, you were too, Mr. President.
We got
and then you both kind of go back and forth saying how you're both right.
We got a few to go. But we're starting to really we're starting to really jam up the scoreboard on Ukraine, huh?
Are you willing to make any sort of prediction on what's on these audio recordings, or do you want to wait?
I'd be giving. Oh, no, I know what's on the audio.
Oh, you know.
I mean, I don't know that there are audio recordings, but I know what the deal is between the two of them. It's real simple. I'm going to explain it. I explained it to you. The deal is that Joe would be available to fix the case when Poroshenko inevitably moved to take the company away from the guy you saw, Zlochevsky. Now, again, Poroshenko was the new president of Ukraine. All of us in the naive world thought he was honest. This is undisputed, what I'm about to tell you. He turned out to be even more crooked than the Russian-oriented guy. And he turned out to be the biggest crook in Ukraine. That comes from both sides. That's why he lost 70-30 to Zelensky. Everybody knew he was a crook. When I went back to Ukraine after not being there for a while, surprised that Poroshenko hadn't made more progress against corruption, because I thought Poroshenko was honest. He was the chocolate king of Ukraine. I believe what a lot of, I think, decent Ukrainians believed, which is that a guy that rich isn't going to have to steal the way some of these people steal. And when I got back there, I had dinner with several Ukrainians who are in a very, very strong position to know, some of whom were favorable to him, some of whom had opposed him. But now I said, I hear that Poroshenko can't be that Poroshenko is crooked too. And they say crooked. He's worse than anybody. First of all, he takes enormous bribes, numbers that were higher than in the past. I guess inflation set in. But number two, one guy described them to me like the guy in Godfather 2 who says, I got to wet my beak. Literally, he said he wants to wet his beak in every deal. So if he's totally unrelated to the deal and he doesn't know about it, he gets insulted. And he doesn't want to be unreasonable, he'll say, but he wants like 5 or 10% of it. Like, if you're going to do a crooked deal in my country, I'm the president, I'm entitled to a piece. So there wasn't a person in Ukraine, those in favor of him, those against him. The 30% that voted for him knew he was a crook. Everybody knew he was a crook. Right now, Zelensky has as much evidence of his former president being a massive crook and stealing the money of his countrymen as he does Biden. And he's sitting on it. Now, I'd like you to think about that from the point of view of national security. We are giving enormous amounts of money to Ukraine, which some of us agree with, some of us disagree with, and some of us are 50-50 on, right? I happen to always have been pro-Ukrainian. I love Ukraine for a lot of reasons. Probably goes back to the history of the Cold War, the fact that I have 2 godchildren that are Ukrainian American, and I had a kind of a bird's eye view of the Ukrainian revolution and constitution being done by very, very patriotic Ukrainian Americans. And I happen to think the Ukrainian people are remarkable people. They're very decent, very religious, very well educated. For some reason that I can't completely understand, probably understand it better than most people because I know Ukraine better, but I certainly can't answer it all. The government is exceptionally corrupt. And I'm talking about a region of the world where governments are corrupt, with the exception of Russia. And sometimes there are people that would say that Ukraine at times has been more corrupt than Russia to do business in. These are business people complaining about it. They found more ways to do business in Russia, honestly, than Ukraine. It's entirely corrupt. Now, let's look at this for a second. I have no reason to believe that Zelensky is corrupt. But I have every reason to believe that Zelensky knows all about the corruption. He's got all the evidence. Everything we're talking about, he has in a file or files, and he's covering it up. Now, what kind of leverage does that give him on Biden? How about all the pictures he probably has? Did you ever take a look at that website that has the pictures? See how disgusting those are? There are. I only have 2,000. I'd be shocked if Russia and China don't have all of them. I'd also be shocked if Ukraine doesn't have them. So, when we get a decision to help Ukraine, which is important, what are we getting an honest appraisal? Are we getting accountability imposed on the money? Or are we getting a guy that's got no choice? Biden. I mean, they got him by the short hairs, right? Well, a president can't be in that position for the good of their country and the good of our country. Again, go back and you'll see that it was uncovered. I'm going to not remember the years, so I'm not even going to give you the years because it'll turn out to be wrong. Go back to the podcast. But it was uncovered at some point, I think after the Obama administration, but it happened in the Obama administration. The Ukrainians discovered an independent accounting analysis of Ukraine revealed that there was $5 billion in unaccounted for foreign aid given to Ukraine. In other words, money given to Ukraine from foreign governments or foreign conglomerations of foreign governments, you know, like the IMF. But they couldn't show what happened to it. So the Ukrainian president at the time, either Poroshenko or the guy before, decided we better look at that because we're going to get cracked down on and we better have some answers. So they began an internal audit before anybody else audited it. Who knows? Maybe they wanted to straighten out the books or create false books or who knows what they were doing an audit. Lo and behold, representatives of the American government come and visit them, high level, very high level, and tell them, and ultimately, I think the president of Ukraine stopped the audit. But you know, eventually you're going to, don't worry. Meaning we don't want to, Obama doesn't want to know. And the little then that I got of the audit that they had started and the one they restarted that I think was closed down again, could have been by Zelensky. It would have implicated Soros and Americans. Because not only were the Ukrainians reaching in and taking out about half the money, but they were sharing it with their American friends. And of course, I've had more than a few honest Ukrainians say to me, it really is counterproductive when your people come here and lecture us about corruption and they're just as corrupt as we are. Well, of course, that would be true with Biden, right? He would go there and give lectures on corruption. And meanwhile, he isn't just wetting his beak, he's stuffing his big fat face and every other big fat face in his family.
And he's openly bragging about it on stage with those other.
You know, if I could analyze that for you, I won't do it again. I've done it so often. I can analyze that for you right against a law book definition of bribery. And that is a classic admission, confession of the crime of bribery. The offering of something of value for official action, or the withholding of something of value for official action. What did he withhold? The $1 billion loan guarantee. Why was it valuable? Ukraine was technically completely broke. They would have gone under completely and pretty much disappeared as a nation. Poroshenko had to get that money, and nobody else would give him money from anywhere else. I mean, the prior crook left them with about $800,000 in the bank. They stole something like 40 or 50 billion, including Zlochevsky as part of that. So he had to get the money. And And he told him, if you don't get rid of the guy in 7 hours, I'm leaving and you're not getting the money. And he got rid of him. That's the official action. That's it. That's the crime of bribery. The offering of something or withholding something of value, $1 billion, for official action, firing Shokin. Firing him. Shokin. That's Mr. Shokin, in case you ever meet him. See, Mr. Shokin right here.
There we go. Yep, we got it.
That's Mr. Shokin. He was the prosecutor who got fired. And I'll correct one mistake in the FBI report. Only one that I know of. Mistake. The others I either don't. There might be mistakes that I don't know of, or the other, or a lot of it is completely accurate. The only mistake I know for sure in the FDI 1023 is they say he was fired in March of 2020. Fired in February of 2020 because he and Poroshenko did not want to fire him. Poroshenko liked him. Waited to make it public for a month. During that month, you do know that Joe Biden also, and I always forget to mention this, which is also another indication of how corrupt it is. Joe Biden participated in the selection of his successor. He participated in the selection of the prosecutor of his son's case. Oh, by the way, that guy wasn't a lawyer. They had to delay everything because they had to get a special exemption from the legislature, which I think is the RADA, R-A-D-A. I think that's it. Well, the legislature. And I used to know this all cold, but you know what happens to... Oh, we got a call. We got to wait. We got to wait on that call. Okay. So we're going to have to see how far they go with these 17 audio recordings. Does this go down the black hole, like the Pfizer documents, and we find out in 75 years of the Kennedy assassination, and we find out in 80 years, or are we gonna? I mean, we quite honestly, unless there's something wrong with you, you don't need any more proof that Biden is a crook. You got more proof that Biden is a crook than any American I've ever heard of. I mean, it's I can't even count the number of witnesses that you've seen on television, that I have on tape, that have testified. I can't think of more documents that actually show, just in one document or two, a crime. The $14 billion money laundering transaction. Okay, I can't think of one. Any more evidence that you need? Bobulinski, Gilliers, the two people that tell you he's the big guy with the 10%, and that everything he's saying about not knowing about foreign transactions of his son is a big lie, that he was deeply involved. We're in a very, very bad period of time for our great country, Ted. Very, very bad period of time. It's very sad to see this country that was the glory of the world in terms of justice become one of the worst countries.
And Mayor, of course, with the committee's work, what do you expect to come out next? Not, of course, you know a lot of this. A lot of the stuff that's coming out, you've known for a number of years now. Do you have any sense of where this investigation will go from here? And could this be the actual definition of a smoking gun? Could these audio recordings?
Well, what was? I mean, no. We have a smoking howitzer, a cannon, the hard drive, and that didn't do it. I mean, the hard drive would have blown anybody out of the water in any election, any place in history, but they covered it up.
So even this.
So when you live through what I've lived through, which is things that are extraordinary in terms of proving that this man is a massive crook. And somehow his co-conspirators were able to cover it up. I'm not sure, even if he got these 17 recordings, and even if on these 17 recordings, it was clear that he was getting a bribe, that first of all, we'd have to have a way to get the American people to hear it. Second, who knows what they would say about it? Look how they've indicted Trump for something that for something much worse that they specifically didn't indict Hillary Clinton for, or they could easily indict Biden for, because in Biden's case, Trump starts off with a right to have the documents. He was president of the United States. Biden had no right to take them with him. He was the vice president of the United States. There was no Presidential Records Act that he could be operating under, even if it were a mistake. So it begins as being illegal completely. Second, when you look at the path of the documents, even if you take everything in the indictment as true about Trump, there's no indication that American security was jeopardized in the sense that this would fall into the hands of any of our enemies. There's no indication of that. Could it have? I don't know. They hack. Anything could fall in the hands. There's no indication of that. In the case of Biden, he put them deliberately in places where the Chinese had access to them. And nobody wants to make that point. Where are the documents? Chinatown. 2 offices where China pays most of the money for the institute, the academic institute, and the private institute that China is a part of. And finally, his house, which is actually Hunter Biden's house, where Hunter lived, and the documents are right there on the garage. And Hunter's going back and forth in that garage every day. And Hunter is telling us on the text that he's a partner of the spy chief of China. So now let's just look at this hypothetically for a minute. Guy's got classified documents he's not supposed to have. He's got them on a table. And he knows that every day a guy in a close relationship with the Chinese spies passes them every day. He knows it because he's in the same business with the Chinese spies as that guy. And there are witnesses all around to prove it. Okay. And the FBI does nothing about this and they go get Trump? How can you tolerate this? How can you let this happen? I mean, you, our citizens, you voted for him. I mean, that we have only one option, and we do, quite honestly, one option. And that is, first of all, our option is to vote them out of office, vote them all out of office so they reform their crooked political party. Wouldn't be a bad idea for them to rename it too, in this age of being so careful about names. There's no institution in the history of this country that was more favorable to slavery than the party of Joe Biden. The Democrat Party, I like to call it that. They like to call it Democratic Party. I don't care what the hell you call it. It's the party of slavery. It's also the party of Jim Crow. It's also the party of the Ku Klux Klan. It's also the party that sucks blood out of poor black people in the inner cities of America, where in 50 years they have done nothing. You want to know who cleaned up Harlem? Not the African-American crooks who preceded me, who all became millionaires as Harlem rotted. I did. You come and tell me who did more for Harlem than me and got it to a place where people were starting to pay real money for houses and national businesses came in. They wouldn't come in when the Democratic crooks were running it, because all that poverty money, what the hell do you think has happened to it now? How many of these contracts for homeless people have the guy getting millions And then his brother running the security and his sister running the kitchen and his wife doing the major cleaning service for 15 of them. And they're pulling in 8-10 million. And everything is cost 3 times more. Like the COVID test, Crooked Hochul paid $600 million for the same amount and the same COVID test that California paid $300 million for. And then just surprisingly, she got a $300 million campaign contribution. The company jacked the price up. So you ended up paying Hochul's campaign contribution. This is what they do at the highest levels of that party in the crooked cities. And that's why they have more crime than who knows what. And that's why they never care how many black people die. That's why I care about that. And there aren't enough of me because they don't elect Republicans in those cities. They keep electing the same people who feed off them because they've been conditioned that way. That's what communists do. That's what Saul Alinsky taught them to do. You have to find out who Saul Alinsky is. He taught Obama. He taught Hillary. He was a communist. Well, do we have any calls or any questions?
Well, Mayor, we're getting a lot of questions. The chat room is
I see that somebody, Dennis in Jasper, Indiana, as the first person he ever voted for.
Here, you were the first person. That's right. We talked to him the end of last week. Of course,
somebody wants to unite and march down to the White House and demand justice. Now, look how they've taken our First Amendment away from us. I would caution you not to do that. They'll arrest you and claim you're a terrorist. What I would do is march down to my local Republican headquarters and sign up for ballot security. That's what I would do. That's what I would do. I would, if you give me enough people, we can stop them. We can stop them from cheating. We just need enough people who are going to be available to watch every single thing they do and record every single thing they don't do. And it doesn't mean we'll stop it all. And it doesn't mean we'll win in every court because they got some of these courts fixed too. But we'll hold it down so we got a chance to win. I had to do that in my second election, and I didn't stop all the cheating. As my 2 absolutely great directors of voter integrity told me, one of them went on to be president of the Yankees and the other United States congressman. They said, we held back enough of the cheating, so you're going to win.
I know the president of the Yankees. Who was
Sweeney.
The future congressman?
John Sweeney.
Interesting. I'm going to have to look that up. Of course, we all know Mr. Levine of the New York baseball Yankees. Mayor, getting a lot of questions about tomorrow. Do you maybe want to go over what you expect to see tomorrow just from a planning purposes for our viewers?
Yeah,
what should they expect
first of all,
out of Miami
this is not
tomorrow?
meant to demean anything or whatever, but I was a federal prosecutor, so you have this, what would you say, ego about it, right? Things in federal court are just a little better and that kind of stuff. But usually federal court is more orderly and a little more, how would you say, professional.
Hopefully it's still that way.
So here's what's going to happen, I think. I think it's 3:00, right?
Yeah,
right?
I'll double check that.
Which will be just when I'm on the radio. So you can come and listen to me on WABCradio.com, and I will explain to you what's going on in detail. I've only did like 1,000 of these. When you're originally an assistant U.S. attorney, you sometimes do 20 a day because you're there in that courtroom, magistrate's courtroom. I don't know if the arraignment's going to be presided over by a magistrate, or since there's a judge assigned to the case already, the judge will do it. Normally, it's done by a United States magistrate, not by the judge, even if a judge has been assigned to the case. Sometimes, in a very critical case, a very sensitive case, the United States District Judge who's in charge of the case, and if there is a trial, is going to hear the trial, will do it. So, usually we did the processing before the actual appearance in court. So you go see the marshal. The marshal takes your picture. The marshal fingerprints you. The marshal gets identifying information about you. And you then go to court. Sometimes this is done after court. You go before the judge. The judge asks that if you want to have a detailed reading of the indictment. Almost every lawyer says they waive it. They waive the detailed reading of the indictment. And really, the judge says, usually gives some warnings, or the magistrate. Warnings like, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to plead, by the way. Then a not guilty plea will be entered for you. The Fifth Amendment of the Constitution says you don't have to say a damn thing to the government, ever. If people would only remember that, a lot of people who were convicted, some wrongly, would never have been convicted. But normally, the judge then will take a plea. The judge will ask a bunch of questions to make sure that are you under the influence of any drugs, under the influence of alcohol? Are you mentally sound? Has your lawyer explained the charges to you? Yes. Are you satisfied with your lawyer's explanation? Do you have any more questions? Would you like to ask me a question about the indictment? Basically, to make sure you're fully cognizant of what you've been charged with, particularly since you've waived a detailed reading of the indictment. And number two, that you understand the rights that you have. If you indicate that you're going to plead not guilty, that's a very short thing. You indicate you're going to plead guilty, the judge then goes into about a 15-minute real explanation of your rights in great detail to make sure you're not coerced, you're not under, but that's not going to happen. You can be sure of that. So the president then at the right time, unless he just has it entered for him, will be asked, how do you plead? And he'll say, not guilty. As soon as that's done, they'll set bail. And I would assume they will have agreed on bail beforehand. It's absurd for there to be bail. He should be released on his own recognizance. After all, he was the former president of the United States. He has been extraordinarily open about this and talked all about it. There's no reason to believe he's going to run away. Probably, if best thing that could ever happen to the Biden administration is if he ran away, because they can't prove this case. They're just going to make complete idiots out of themselves. But if they insist on bail, then the judge will have to decide. And then here comes the question. What kind of restrictions are they going to put on him? Usually you have the restriction of not leaving the country without getting permission. Sometimes if you have a history of, if you have a history of flight, they would set bail. But if you don't have a history of flight, but it's a really very serious case and you are kind of a shady person, they're going to want you to get permission when you want to leave the state. That's rarely done. If that's done in this case, he would have to appeal that as interfering with his ability to run for president of the United States, which is really what this case is all about anyway. And it would probably, if the government asks for that, it would probably show the government what the government's true purpose is. There should be no restrictions on them. There are no restrictions on most defendants. In a white collar, almost case of first impression. Nobody's ever gotten prosecuted for this before. And when all is said and done, whether true or not, this is not really a terribly serious crime. And nothing bad happened, or at least there's no evidence suggesting something bad happened. At worst, people saw things they shouldn't see, and nothing happened. No harm, no foul. In the case of Biden, if he ever faces this, he's going to have to face the fact that he exposed it to Red China. That's a far different situation. And he doesn't even have an initial right to have taken these documents. Trump starts off with an initial right. So he's got much more room for arguing confusion, mistake, because you can't say that initially he had no right to have these.
Mayor, just a couple minutes.
Oh, and then she'll set a date for motions. If I were the defense, I'd ask for a long time for that, because I'd file a motion that would knock the hell out of it. It'd be a motion that basically says this is the 5th chapter in the effort to frame Donald Trump, and here are all the illegal things they've done to do that, and this case should be dismissed as a miscarriage of justice, which is cases have been dismissed for that reason, and we should take the resources we have here now and get a special prosecutor and investigate all these criminal bums.
Well, Mayor, just a minute left here. We're into soccer time, but of course, then we look around. We have Honest Abe behind us, the
He's
American Eagle,
the first Republican president.
the first Republican president, the Holy Bible, these firefighters, police officers, the American flag, so many symbols and reminders of this country and its greatness. What can you say to those of us who are truly concerned now? Yeah, we always say this and that, crossing the Rubicon. This is concerning.
Yeah, we crossed the Rubicon. We are. I wish I could say something different. I mean, a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, I would say, I remember the first time I used that, I said, we're on an express train to Marxism. Well, we've gone in the station, we've entered the city, and we are now a fascist country. I mean, we were starting to be when the governors like Cuomo and Newsom and Whitlis and were one decree after another, taking away our freedom of religion, taking away our freedom of movement, taking away our privacy. They sure as hell took away my privacy. Boom, just come into my house with probable cause, but then no probable cause that I committed any crime. A year and a half later, they write a letter to the grand jury saying there's no evidence I committed any crime. But what the hell did they come to my house for? Why do they? Now, how about going to my law office? Not just me, all the others. One of the motions they're going to make here is their complete trashing of attorney-client privilege. They've been trashing attorney-client privilege for 5 years. This is just the latest iteration of their doing it. I think all of that should be in the motion before the judge, because this is not in a vacuum. This is, they tried to frame the whole idea of Russian collusion originally was to stop him from being president. Paid for, total lie created by Hillary Clinton, for which she's not been held accountable. When it failed to do that, they resurrected it as a created, false, concocted reason to remove a lawfully elected government, to accomplish a coup. Pretty close to treason, isn't it? They failed by that much. Then when that didn't work, they created an entirely false description of his conversation with the president of Ukraine, which now you realize, because they were holding all this back at the time, you now realize was not only justified, but necessary. So that was concocted and false and supported by numerous crimes of obstruction of justice and concealment. And now then we get to the hard drive, which proves all of this and shows that he shouldn't be president. And they cover it up. They get the New York Post banned. You don't think this is the same thing? Of course it is. Just look at the fact that nobody's ever been prosecuted for this. I'm sure they'll do it. We can go back and show that every president has been in a situation worse than this, including the one sitting in the White House. His situation is much worse. Again, just in real terms of danger to the U.S. He put the U.S. in danger. Trump didn't. You've got situations like this going back to Johnson, Nixon. I don't know about Ford, Carter, Reagan. big ones with Obama. He wanted to digitize his records. He took loads of records. He never digitized. I don't know, was it a front? They're still not digitized. By the way, it doesn't take that long to digitize. I've digitized all my records as mayor in 2 years. I'm not afraid of you going to look at my records. Why the hell do you think Obama didn't digitize his records? He doesn't want anybody having an easy attempt to go through his records. Because, look, everything rots, something like this, it rots from the top. Who was the top? You're telling me that he tolerated this kind of criminal behavior, which he knew about on the part of, I mean, he knew Hillary Clinton was framing Trump and didn't do anything about it. Well, he just likes to, what is he, a voyeur? He just likes to look around other people stealing? He doesn't? I don't know. It might be that he's a corruption voyeur.
That's
he doesn't,
right,
he's not corrupt
Mayor.
himself, but he doesn't care if his vice president is the most corrupt vice president in history and sells the country out to Ukraine, Russia, China. He just likes to watch. What do you think?
That's right, Mayor. So what is your closing thoughts on this
my
very
closing
busy
thoughts
Monday?
is we're going to overcome this because we're really strong, and we get stronger when we get challenged. I just want you to please, please fight through your prejudices, fight through your biases. I don't care if in the past you've hated Trump. Think of Trump as every man, because you could be Trump if we let this happen. We cannot let this happen. This is the biggest crisis our country has ever internally faced, ever. Communists have been building up to this for 100 years, and they got us just where they want us. If we make a mistake here, we will be a disgraceful generation. We'll be looked down upon by people all over the world, and we will have let down our children. So this is a long battle. It's going to go on until November, but it's got to be won, and it's got to be won decisively. And there's got to be complete destruction of the present Democrat Party so that good Democrats can come along and recreate a really decent party like we used to have. And I would recommend to them giving it another name, because the name is odious, not just now, but also in the 19th century. And apparently we go back and change names that are odious from the 19th century. So we better change that one if you're not a bunch of miserable hypocrites. There's a lot to be done to reform this country, but it can all be done at the ballot box. So let's keep together. Go to rudygiulianics.com and you'll see plenty of proof. Subscribe, and also subscribe on Twitter. And we're now beginning to put out a good deal of additional information on Twitter, and you'll be privy to it, and you'll be able to communicate with me, and we can stay together. So we'll see you tomorrow night. And I'll be on WABCRadio.com at 3 tomorrow afternoon. The Rudy Giuliani Show. And back with America's Mayor live tomorrow at 8.
And so everyone tuning in tonight can go to, no matter where you are in the world, go to WABCRadio.com tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Download, great way to get it. And you can follow along live with live coverage and explainer and reaction from the mayor
I think,
at 3 p.m.
I think our show will be going on during the arraignment.
Absolutely. And that's why tomorrow especially, you'll want to go to WABCRadio.com and you'll get the mayor's live explainer reaction to what's going on. And this is someone who knows.
I know what's going on.
Yeah. So really, I know I'll be tuning in.
I've done this surgery 5,000 times.
So if you really want to know what's going on, not just from a partisan political perspective, but the mechanics of what's happening, tune in, WABCRadio.com, 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.